In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Lessons from My Mother. We are on lesson 60. I'm happy with reaching these milestones. I haven't had a few weeks in catching up to my weekly recitations, translations of the Quran and finding God, but hopefully this week I'll be right back on track. 60 lessons is a large enough sample, but as you already know, there are around 86, and I'd like to interview some of my friends. So I am guessing that somewhere in the middle of next year, I'll be done with this series, and then I'll compile them together, and I'll be preparing them into the form of my first nonfiction, which I'll co-author with my mother, obviously. And to all my friends who have already contributed, and to all my friends who are going to be interviewed. Some of them are in Montreal, some of them are in England, some of them are in other countries. I'll be interviewing them, and I look forward to taking their interviews and transcribing them into chapters and then revising them further. I find writing to be an incredibly rewarding process. So looking forward to doing that. Now, for those of us who are familiar with politics or with business or with psychology, philosophy, we understand the meaning of the carrot and the stick. But for those of us, and I suppose it comes out of horses or donkeys, where you feed them a carrot if they follow your command, and you hit them with a stick when they don't. That's the carrot and the stick. In psychological academic terms, we could call it positive and negative reinforcement. And in business terms, you can call it incentives and penalization, or incentivization and penalization. And at home, it could be called rewards and punishment. So essentially, it's the same idea, but it functions at all scales of society. Because I work in international business and trade, I'm somewhat familiar with how large multinational brands and governments punish and incentivize their vendors all across the world. Take the example of Nike, for example. Nike employs people in China, in Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, a lot of the developing world, because you can pay them cheap in sweatshops and they produce their product. I mean, this is a known fact. It's not something that I'm revealing to you today. But when the United Nations puts forth certain regulatory standards that, look, you can't employ this many people, or you can't enforce child labor, or there's a modern slavery act, and so on and so forth, the Nike starts saying to the vendors who run these sweatshops, okay, these are the new rulings. If you don't follow them, we'll take our contract away. That is a punishment. That is the stick. If you don't do this, we'll do this. If you don't reduce your carbon footprint, we're going to do this. If you don't ensure gender equality or racial diversity or ethnic inclusion, we're going to do this. That is the punishment. On the other hand, if you have vendors all across the world, or if you, even in your own country, your own nation, and they align with the standards that you've set, then you incentivize them. You give them tax credits, you give them carbon credits, you give them kickbacks, you give them subsidies, you allow your lobby group to direct some business their way. There's so many things. This is at the governmental level and at the firm level. So we've seen this behavior function because this is how human beings function. We either learn through pain or we learn through encouragement. But what I've seen is that we learn best through both. And I am living example of that, because my mom never spared the rod with us, and I'm grateful she didn't. I needed sufficient amounts of discipline, and I'm glad she was there to give it to me. But at the same time, I remember, I would say at least a couple of times every week, whether I was going to school those days or whether it It was vacation holiday times. I remember my mum either lying down on the bed next to us or sitting with us at the dining table, at the study table, and just talking to us and being very, very encouraging, very, very supportive, and saying things like, um, your math is really good. Why didn't you try to look at what's coming next month? Or you're so good at English writing. Why don't you do this? And you're such a good speaker, and I want you to speak even more. And every time you speak, I'm so proud of you, and it makes me so happy to watch you on stage. And and as a 7 to 8, 10 year old, we don't really register what's happening. We don't really register, oh wow, a positive reinforcement carrot based system is being embedded in me so that she is becoming the wind beneath my wings, like most parents are. And you don't realize that, and you're like, oh, mom's happy. Maybe I'll get some chocolate. Maybe I'll get some dessert. Maybe I'll get to watch extra TV. Maybe I'll get to go see my friends. All of these things come out of it. But but in actual fact, she was building a foundation of positive reinforcement. The negative one had already been built by having two elder brothers, by getting into fights at school, which most children do, and by being educated and trained by my mother, by relatives. So, like in Pakistan, I don't know what the culture is today. I hope it's still closer to how I grew up. Um, Large amounts of respect, structure, obedience, order are instilled in society. It's a collectivist society, and I understand that Western media has taken over globally, so they try to promote the idea of individualism, which has its positives and negatives. But one of the big negatives of individualism is that you lose the communal and social fabric, which is tied together through trust, through respect, through social order and hierarchy. You lose that in the West, and you've seen that in many different countries. So I always argue for the collectivist society, the structure, the benefits of those, and trying to balance it with the individual society, because this also has some benefits. So because of this, even today, my supervisor, he has told me 5,000 times to call him by his first name. I do. I do call him directly. And then I'm like, and every time I write to him, I say, hey, sir, how you doing? And he's like, don't call me sir. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just where I come from. Even though I grew up in England, those foundational beliefs are so embedded inside that it's hard for me to let go of this hierarchy that I've constructed. And for me, this hierarchy is necessary, because if I start just seeing you as an equal, then I might start dismissing ideas of yours, which I may not know enough about. But I might say, oh, you don't know, I know. So the structures are in place for a very, very in-depth reason, and I support it. But anyway, to get back on track. So Mum has always not only done it, but she's advocated for it. And the stick doesn't always have to be physical reprimand. The stick could simply mean, if you're having two dishes of food for dinner, one is a meat dish, the other is a vegetable dish. Mum knows which one I like. She's not going to give me the other one because I was misbehaving or whatever. So she doesn't need to elbow me or break some bone in the body to accomplish that. And then I'm like, can I have some chicken? She's like, no, you didn't do this, so you're not having chicken today. As a child, you're like, what? But I deserve chicken. I'm a growing boy. Like, no. Well, you should have eaten your veggies in the afternoon. I told you, if you don't eat your veggies in the afternoon, at dinner, you're not going to get the main dessert. Because as children, we don't really think long term, do we? We're like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy this now, and devil take the hindmost. But that kind of training really started making you think, oh, I need to. Why am I being forced to eat vegetables? Because obviously they're good for me. Thank you, my vegans and vegetarian friends. I'm glad these statements are making you happy. But obviously they're good for you, right? So why am I being forced to eat these things? As children, we don't really care about the reasoning of it. But this kind of method at least tells you, I don't know why I'm supposed to eat this stuff, even as a 5 to 7 year old, but I know I'm supposed to in order to get what I want. So this would happen too. Or this is the best one. I remember if I scored poorly on an exam, or if I fought with my brothers, because I have three brothers, so you can imagine a lot of, at least with the older three, the younger one is a prince in our house. We can't touch him. He's a king. But the older three, we would fight and break a lot of stuff, and everyone's bleeding and things are broken. And now, if you have three boys in the house and they're already hitting each other, if you hit them further, it doesn't really accomplish much, does it? So my mum would just refuse to talk to us for a couple of hours, and she'd come and she'd put the food on the table and not sit with us, or we'd go to her room. And as children, you realize this very quickly. You're like, something's off. This is even worse than being physically reprimanded. Please just slap my face and be okay with it. At least talk to me. You're my mother. You're the center of my universe. You're my soul. Why aren't you speaking to me? So this would happen as a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old, and we'd be like, Mama, and we'd go and try to get her to talk, and she'd just be like, she's reading, or she's just looking, or she's pretending to be asleep. And now when I ask her, I was like, Mom, what used to be going through your head? She was like, oh, I was broken. It was devastating. Because for mothers, and I say this with all due respect to fathers, being a man myself, all due respect to fathers, the mother-child bond is just next level, right? Because fathers develop a sociological relationship, but mothers have a biological relationship. It has grown into their bodies. It has been fed through the umbilical cord. It has come out of them. And even when you're out of them, you're still connected. The heart and the soul, there's some connection that is maintained even then. Try to take a mother away from their child. 99% of the times, the mother goes insane. The child goes insane. Not so with fathers. So I love and respect fathers. My brothers, hopefully when I'm one too, all the fathers in the world, I love and respect you, but you have to understand. The mother-child bond is a whole other story, and I'm sure you know that too. So now when I ask, Mum, when you used to pretend not to speak to us for a couple of hours, how did that make you feel? And she's like, oh, because I'd pretend to be asleep, but inside I'd be crying, because I'd be like, I'm putting my child through such painful torment. And my silence wasn't the hard part. I can be silent, I'm grown up. But my child is constantly trying to speak to me. But I know that I have to negate my intense base impulse as a mother, because I have to teach this child a certain lesson which is going to invariably benefit them in the future. Invariably, whether it's eating your vegetables or doing your homework or not fighting with your siblings or showing respect, so many things. But I have to silence this gigantic maternal beast or divine energy inside me, because I know that my child needs this. Oh, isn't that painful? When she told me, I cried, and she cried, and I was like, oh. At 8, I wasn't even thinking that you were going through this. I had no idea. It's so interesting to me how she went through that. But she realized that the stick was very important. And when I behaved well, because me and some of my brothers, we were always high scorers in school. And this is how I mentioned one of the first lessons of this series. Last year, yes. Last June. And I started talking about how as soon as I scored a certain result in my exam, my mom was like, cool, what do you want? I want that sword. We're going right now. The incentive was so expedient and swift that as a child, you don't really think about, oh, then this will happen, then that will happen, then I'll resist. You just want instant gratification. And my mum, although she's trained us for delayed gratification through the carrot and the stick, at moments where the incentive, according to her, is required to be highlighted, it's always instant. You got 25 out of 25? Yes. What do you want? I want that sword. Let's go now. Go, buy the sword, sword in hand, back home. Do you want some burgers or fries? No, I'm good. Cool, back home. Just like that. So the carrot, I remember, and I'm saying this as a rebel, as a troublemaker, as the or one of the most talkative and distracted students in class. Distracted because I would finish before everyone else and just start teasing everyone. I'm that guy, right? As that sort of a person who you would expect would be reprimanded 50 times a day, I still remember more moments of positive reinforcement than negative. Because although the negative were there and they are very required, there, there were never so many that you'd say, oh, I'm not going home from school because all my mum does is hit me. No, that never happened. It would happen. It would happen at the opportune time, never unnecessarily. Because once it would happen after, you'd be like, yeah, I screwed things up. I shouldn't have broken my brother's nose. Yeah, okay, I get it. Oh, my one time, me and my elder brother were play fighting, like kids do. I think I was 7, and I pushed him on the bed, pushed him on my parents' bed, and I was like, ha ha ha, and I ran away. And I think when he fell, the bed frame hit his head, so he was really annoyed. So he got up and ran behind me. He tried to grab my face from behind. He grabbed it, and his nails left marks on my face, like lines of, scratches. But they started bleeding after a while. And I was like, oh my God. And my mum came home, and she was like, what happened to you? Oh, well, he did this. And he was like, Mom, but he hit me on the head. And she was like, oh, what do I do? They're both already hurt. How can I fix this? So how do you punish two people who already in that moment, I love my brother, dislike each other and like, oh, he made me bleed. Oh, he hurt my head. So she said, so should hug each other. And she made us hug each other. And she was like, hug while your hearts are touching. So we would have to hug like this. And she was like, stay like that. And then sit with each other and shake hands. And and that is a stick in disguise, right? She's a stick in disguise, but a carrot in disguise of a stick in disguise. Because she's making us befriend each other when the last thing we want to do is to even see each other's faces and like, oh, why am I hugging this guy? I want to hit him back so much. And that was such a wonderful lesson. And then we'd sit and within 5 minutes, then she'd make us apologize. Say sorry. Say sorry. Why are you sorry? Well, I'm sorry because of the why I'm sorry. And she'd make us talk about it. And then she'd be like, okay, wash your face, put ice on your head, let's have lunch. And we'd get to lunch, which was 3 or 4 minutes later, and everything would be fine. She had solved the problem. Because how do you, honestly, I say this to her now. I said, Mom, this was a master stroke. This was a checkmate. Because if I really dislike my brother at that time because he's hurt me and I've hurt him, the last thing I would want to do is spend time with him or be affectionate to him. I want to hit him more. I want to increase the pain. And so does he. And to make us hug each other and shake hands and apologize in that moment. Not like, okay, I'll give you 2 hours of timeout and then he'll come and... No. She was like, instantly. And what that did was take all that tension that had built up and suddenly dissolve it. And we were like, okay, you hit me, I hit you, cool. Because I think this is one of the things she said. Look, you hit his head, you scratch his face, done. I don't want to see any more of this. And she knew that a couple of days later, this would happen again, especially we're kids, and especially because we're boys. We'd see that again. And she was like, nope, I'm going to solve it this way. I think it was a genius maneuver because 5 minutes later at the lunch table, we were laughing. And that happens even today. Sometimes I have arguments with my brothers. That's no big deal. And sometimes the arguments can get to points where it's tense or it's uncomfortable. Within 20 minutes or so, things are fine. Like, okay, we had a back and forth. I said stuff, you said stuff. Cool, we're good. We don't take it so personally that, oh, my life is destroyed by something that you said to me. Oh, we're like, okay, no, you've not only said, you've hurt my head, you've scratched my face, you've broken this. I know you. Okay, I've known you for 36 years. So I'm not surprised if you do something like this. And we have so many wonderful memories together. So nothing, touch wood, thank God, nothing so great happens that it divides or breaks the brothers up. And I think that was one of her underlying motivations for this teaching, right? And motivation for this teaching was, look, I'm here now, but one day I won't be here anymore, and these boys will still be in each other's lives because they're linked by blood, they're brothers. Um, so I have to train them to be brothers of the manner where large things could go wrong between them, but they still manage to somehow stay in touch. I talk to all three of my brothers multiple times a month, sometimes many times a week. I talk to my parents 4 or 5 times a week at least, thankfully. But my brothers as well. And it's never about, oh, last time you said this, I didn't like that. It's just, yeah, what's up? What do you want? How's that? How's this? Okay. And then it just jumps into thoughts and ideas and perspectives and goals and family. It's just everything. And I die for them, I'd kill for them. And that is built upon this deep foundation that she found. And we've all been through the same school of thought, barring my younger brother, who was very young when we moved to England. The elder three, special, but the younger one as well, when he grew older. We've been through my mother's school of thought. So we understand the same principles. These lessons could be done by any one of my brothers. It's not something that, oh, only Ali knows. Especially on my own, I could come up with 40 or 50. I had to consult all three of them and say, look, I have these 50 lessons. What can you add to these? And they started adding so many. They're like, oh, what about this? What about this? I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about all this. Absolutely. So I think this training that she's given all of us about the positive and the negative, and I see all three of my brothers do this with their children. And hopefully when I have children soon, inshallah, I'll be doing the same thing, the positive and the negative, maybe in varying degrees and depending on how my partner operates. But I'd be doing the same thing because I think that's the best tactic of training and educating. And you can see that in government and in business and interpersonal relationships. And you can see that at the home. And I hope that is maintained in schools and educational facilities. You can't coddle someone too much. If you're coddling someone or protecting someone, then they lose all sense of fear. And fear is incredibly important. It keeps you human and keeps you regulated. I don't mean fear of persecution. I don't mean fear of being whipped. I didn't mean any of that. I mean fear of some sort of a reprimand which would cause discomfort in a student. If you say to a student, I'm going to detain you, go to detention. Oh, yes, sure, take your phone. Oh, yes, sure, take your AirPods. That doesn't mean anything. They're just going to go put some Netflix on, put some AirPods, and just relax there for 2 hours and then eat something and go home. A reprimand has to be in a certain manner, which causes some sort of discomfort and reflection in the receiver. Otherwise, it's too much of a coddling of the mind, and you can't do that. It weakens the soul. It weakens the person. You need to exposure therapy dictates that you expose the child or the person to positives and negatives, to desires and fears, right? So I think this carrot and stick metaphor really applies to multiple scales of society, whether it's a child or a student or an employee or the government or a supplier and so forth. So grateful to my mum for teaching me this lesson. 24 minutes. I'm going to stop at 25, but thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful week ahead. Winter's here. I'm so glad. And I shall see you